The convergence of our voices is the song of our beauty. Many voices will speak here, the song woven through diverse notes. Hello and welcome to Diane Roberts. And the first thing I'd like to ask you, Diane, um,
Mhm.
I know you're a theatre person, very much
Mhm.
involved in theatre and training and directing, but I would like you to describe yourself.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me. I am, where do I start in describing myself? I always have this, I always wonder where the beginning is, like how to tell the story of me in 1 minute. I live in Montreal, in Jojage, on the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka peoples. Yes. And I am a director, I'm a cultural animator, and I am a dramaturg. And this idea of cultural animator is a title I added probably in the early 2000s to kind of contextualize a way of working that is inside and outside theater in a way. Um, I am the daughter of Helen Irva Roberts and Godfrey Roberts. I am the granddaughter of Edna Joseph and Delmar Roberts and Dighton Stevenson and Sylvia Lamotte, great granddaughter of Iona Joseph. And
Oh,
that's as far as I know.
yeah, well, it's great to acknowledge the ancestors known and unknown.
Mhm.
Um, So I'd like you to explain a bit more what you mean by cultural animator.
Hmm. Yeah, like I was saying, I added this title a while back because I felt that there was a part of the work that wasn't really being contextualized in my titles as director and dramaturg. And this idea of really looking in through a cultural lens at works, but also at artists, like trying to bring artists into their own cultural bodies and rooting themselves in their root cultural traditions. This is part of what I call cultural animation. The other thing is how we create spaces for people um, to learn about themselves and to learn about each other in a way that goes beyond the theatrical moment. We often get into these intimate relationships, but when we're in a production or working on a piece, but how do we bring that level of relationship building into our practice as a regular thing? How do we learn to weave some of these, um, I guess, cultural knowledges that come up as we work on a production or work on a piece? How do we weave that into uh, a, a, a practice that has a kind of a breadth and that leads us to a vision, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And also leads us to connections, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And is that the inspiration behind the Arrivals Legacy project?
Yes, it
Yes.
most definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And describe the project, its
Hmm.
components. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Arrivals Legacy process itself started about 20 years ago, actually, exactly around 20 years ago. I was teaching an introduction to theater class for acting students mostly. And I was also teaching another course for theater studies students that was about African and Indigenous ways of knowing. So those two courses were kind of working in tandem. in this was around 2003 when I was in residence at Concordia University. And I started to uh, think about the students that were going to be coming into the courses and thinking about my own experience. I was the only Black person in my theater program in my undergrad in my year. And so I was thinking about what would I need if I were a young me coming into a theater program. And I knew that at the time, Concordia had quite a diverse representation of students that were coming in. So I invented this exercise and I thought I would ask them to research and embody an ancestor in a compelling moment in time. So this was going to be an exercise where I was teaching them about presence. How do you tell a story by living in a moment, in a space that you create, and just tell the story by living that moment. So I said you could have three objects and you can say up to three words.
No.
And you can repeat the words, but you couldn't rely on language to tell the story. You had to rely on your body to just live this moment. And it just became a really profound exercise for the students. They had to do a lot of research by talking to parents and aunts and uncles, etc., about this particular ancestor. And what they realized was the ancestor they chose was the ancestor they needed.
Mm.
And so they started really finding these threads of connection between their family history, their ancestral subject, and where they were today in trying to learn this process of creation, like why they were in the theater program, why they were taking this step into story making, story weaving. So that really sort of settled in me as a really profound moment and exercise. So I took it into another situation where I was teaching a master's class in at York University. It was called Testimony, Performance, and there was another part of the title, but it was a cultural production workshop. So I was working with older students and people from different disciplines, some PhD students, some master's students, and did this exercise with them. And it just deepened even more because of the experience they brought to it. And I found one of my first partners in the work, Heather Hermont, and I started working together and creating the arrivals process. We did our first workshop for professional artists in 2005. And then after that, I was seconded or invited to take over Urban Ink Productions by the founder, by Urban Ink's founder, Marie Clements. And so I brought the arrivals work to Urban Ink and started doing these workshops across the country. We were funded by the Canada Council to do a series of workshops. So we did 5 workshops in different cities across Canada, and then did a cultural lab where we brought 17 artists from each of those workshops. They had representatives from each of those workshops and did a lab to explore further how the process had impacted. So the process kind of grew up with me as I grew up in my relationship to, I guess, animating spaces. And now, 20 years later, it's still going strong. We created a company last year. In 2021, we created a company and have a digital platform now where we have over 300 alumni artists, and the platform is called the Seed Pool, and it's a place for people to who have taken the workshops to plant seeds. So it could be an image or a video, short video, a provocation, an essay, or a poem. And then somebody else in the seed pool, another artist, might pick that seed up and put music to your poem. Or so it creates a collaborative space, a co-creative space,
Mhm.
where people can sort of investigate and experiment with some of the seeds that come out of doing this process.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That sounds just so fulfilling and
Mhm.
uh, a way to get just deep work from people and
Mhm.
collaborations going. So you did mention Urban Inc. Uh,
Mhm.
how was your time there?
Oh, it was wonderful. Like I was saying, I grew up, I think, as an artist during my tenure as artistic director. I started in 2007 and completed my tenure in 2014, at the end of 2014. It was really a wonderful opportunity to, I guess, stretch my skill sets as a producer, um, and a director, and also this role of cultural animation really sort of came to the fruition um, when uh, when I took over the company. The company was founded as an Indigenous company that also did work. At the time, Marie characterized it as Indigenous and multicultural. And when I took over, I sort of shifted the multicultural term to this idea of intercultural. And we were the first company that really had that kind of mandate. And I remember when I took over the company, it was a challenge for the councils to
Ah,
understand us. They kept saying,
yeah.
well, now that you've taken over, is it still an Indigenous company? And I
Mhm.
said, why wouldn't it be? Because if I was a white person taking over the company, you wouldn't really ask the question. You would just assume that this new artistic director was continuing the mandate. You wouldn't ask, is this now a white company?
Yes.
So it was a challenge for them. And yeah, I was working with some really wonderful advisors as well around that time. Chris Creighton Kelly was one of them who was really sort of brokering this transition between Marie and I.
Mhm.
So we would have meetings, even before I came, we would have meetings to talk about how we understand the mandate as an Indigenous theater company and what it meant for me to come in. And the arrivals work was a really wonderful bridge to dig in and understand that, um, I guess, cross-cultural or transcultural mission
Yeah.
that the company had from its founding. So,
Mhm.
so it was really, I think it was a really wonderful generative time, and I met some incredible artists and have continued to work with many of the artists that I've met through Urban Inc.
Mhm. Mhm. And what are you up to now?
Now, okay. Now, I guess the most uh, prominent thing is that I'm doing my PhD.
Mhm.
So I've been studying the arrivals work through the lens of African and Indigenous ways of knowing and performance. And so um, I have been exploring my own root cultural spaces, one of which is the Garifuna peoples, who were the peoples that were born in St. Vincent and basically moved through the diaspora,
Yes.
through exile and subsequent exiles and resettlements
Yes.
through Central America.
Yes, I don't think I'm not sure if I told you that I had some Garifuna ancestry myself.
I did not know that.
And I
No.
only recently found out about it. So it's a
Hmm.
very exciting thing to learn about.
Hmm. Yeah, I found out through Arrivals, through my own
Ah,
research, and
yes.
yeah, it was one. Yeah, and it was. I mean, it was very interesting because it. I found out before I found out.
Yeah.
So I remember being at a listening post. Remember, Mayo used to have these listening posts. I think it was in Indigo Books
Ah.
or chapters or something. They had these listening posts, and so there was a CD that was a Garifuna singer, Andy Palazzo, and I was listening to the music, and my I bought it for myself. It was Christmas, and I was buying presents for other people, and I bought this present for myself.
Yes.
And I remember I was cooking, and my body was moving to this music. I was playing it really loud while I was cooking, and I kept thinking, well, why does this feel so familiar? Because it's Central America, and I have no connections to Central America. And I just figured it was the sort of rhythmic similarities between that and Caribbean music. And then I think it was maybe a few months later, a friend sent me an article about the Garifuna peoples and that they were born in St. Vincent. And so that's when I started to really dig into those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you find that you now have a Garifuna community of sorts? Yeah.
I do, yeah. And my research took me on a sojourn along the exile route of the Garifuna. So I
Hmm.
went to St. Vincent on the day that and presented at a conference. This is the Garifuna Heritage Foundation that was founded, I think it was in 2001 or 2003, somewhere around that time. It was founded in St. Vincent. And so the people who are the diaspora of the Garifuna that are in Belize, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Honduras, they travel back now to St. Vincent
Hmm.
around the anniversary of the exile, which is March 11th.
Yeah.
So I found myself there. I was there during one of these conferences, and I got to go to Baliso, which was the first point of exile of
Hmm.
the Garifuna. And then in April, I traveled through Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras, sometimes by boat. Yeah, and that's part of my research. It was for my research was to trace that Garifuna route and to put my body into that historic space of movement and exile. And
Yes, yes.
yeah,
And
so now I feel like I have a beautiful Garifuna network of people that I'm connected to.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm. And more ancestor work.
More ancestor work indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And unfortunately, my father is not in he has Alzheimer's, so he can't participate necessarily, but he participates in other ways, you
yeah.
know. Yeah, so mhm.
So some of your other work you've done throughout the years, this might not be a fair question, but I'm going to say, is there any moment that stands out to you as being particularly impactful?
Hmm. Um, I think there have been many moments. I mean, what comes to mind is directing a hip hop theater show, which I
Ah.
could never imagine myself doing. I was working with it was the last show that we did at Urban Inc. called Sal Capone, The Lamentable Tragedy of. And we did this production in partnership with Black Theater Workshop
Hmm.
in Montreal. So we premiered the show in Montreal and then brought it back out to Vancouver. And yeah, it was just a wonderful production, working closely with playwright Omari Newton, who's also a talented MC, and working with yeah, just an excellent team and cast. That was a highlight for sure in terms of my directing career.
Yeah.
Um, I think most recently, I just was part of a panel of incredible women. This was at Black Theater Workshop, and it stands out to me because it almost felt like being on that panel. I felt like my life was passing before my eyes, like my just the panel was moderated by Debbie Young,
Hmm.
and on the panel was Donna Michelle Bernard, um, Marcia Johnson, myself, and Janet Sears.
Oh,
It was
wonderful icons.
yeah, yeah, it was just such a glorious, glorious conversation.
Hmm.
And it started off with us acknowledging the what Debbie how Debbie framed it was honoring the mothers, like who mothered you as you went through um your career as an artist, and just being able to sort of acknowledge that history and where I am now and where I was as I was entering in as that young, only Black student in the theater program, sort of coming up against the racism of teachers who didn't understand what to do with my little Black body.
Yeah.
Um, and then, coming to this place of taking all of that and putting it into a practice that would ensure that nobody else would have to go through what I went through.
Hmm.
And not that it doesn't happen, because I hear from young people all the time.
Yeah.
Some of the stories I used to tell, they're still telling,
Ah,
which is disconcerting, but real, very real.
yes. And that the young people now would have some support from a wider community, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. But what I do find is that there isn't that acknowledgement of the history of
Oh,
what came before, and that's why this panel was so important,
hmm.
because I find that young people, um, in some of the stories that are coming out, there's this sense of isolation, and there's this
Ah,
sense that this has only happened now.
hmm.
There isn't this sense that this has been a continuity
Ah,
of discrimination and that other people before them have gone through this. There's
hmm.
just this feeling that, oh, it's all happening to me now. And I think it's also post-pandemic. There's a
Ah, yeah.
very kind of I would say okay, I'll be dramatic about it, pathological sense of isolation and individualism
Hmm.
that has come out just due to the fact that one has to survive. One has had to survive some of these systems that don't seem to be as helpful as they could be.
Mm.
I see it's getting a bit stormy, so I'm going to turn on a light.
Ah.
I don't know if that helps.
Um, I don't know. Ah, well, so now I will say thank you for that really interesting talk. And
Mhm.
thank you to my audience. And I hope that you will come back and listen to more of my talks on Crone Chronicles.
Mm,
We'll see you later. Bye.
thank you.